60 conversations with cultural creators, internationalists, and observers of the urban scene in Los Angeles, Toronto, Copenhagen, and London. It's Notebook on Cities and Culture's next season, and the Kickstarter drive begins Monday, June 17th. Keep an eye on colinmarshall.org for details. Thanks. Season 3 of Notebook on Cities and Culture is brought to you by Carl Haley and Daniel Murphy. A friend of mine in San Francisco has a saying that everyone in San Francisco is a little bit gay, everyone in New York is a little bit Jewish, everybody in Los Angeles is a little bit Mexican, everybody in Vancouver is a little bit, to your mind, what?
Oh, this curveball.
Yes, first thing.
Everyone in Vancouver is a little bit wet, I guess.
A little bit wet. It's not so rainy here right now, though.
No, right now it's fine, but it comes and goes.
It is Notebook on Cities and Culture. I'm Colin Marshall, coming to you from, I think it's Mount Pleasant here in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. Not too wet, but cherry blossoms falling everywhere. I'm talking with Dave Shumka, comedian, co-host of Stop Podcasting Yourself, very popular comedy podcast here. And as well, he works for the CBC, so his finger is on the national consciousness. You'd say that, right?
Yeah, I say it all the time.
Right, sure.
Where are your fingers? The national consciousness.
The national consciousness. Tell me, and feel free to take a drink while I ask this question.
Yeah, all right.
Maybe I'll make it long. Tell me how much more accurate a read of Vancouver you get, listening to the CBC or listening to podcasts?
Oh, I don't. You mean podcasts from here?
Yeah.
There aren't too many, so
right.
I think you probably get a better read from listening to CBC, but. I don't know. Vancouver's sort of like the, in terms of media, it's always been the sort of neglected stepchild.
Versus Toronto,
yeah. And that's one of those one-way rivalries where we feel that Toronto is sort of overrated and gets all this attention, and they don't even notice us.
It's the same way with, say, San Francisco and Los Angeles. Do you get the sense of a similar one-way rivalry?
I don't really know which I guess San Francisco is the
San Francisco is the Vancouver
brother?
in that equation, in that comparison. I recall an episode of Stop Podcasting Yourself when you said you went to Los Angeles, but about the 2 square blocks around your hotel, and that was your experience, right?
Yeah, because Los Angeles is a city where you have to drive everywhere.
Not necessarily. I don't have a car.
Oh,
I'll tell you that, Dave Shumka.
How do you get around?
Subway, bike, all that kind of thing.
Okay. Well, when you're traveling there, I mean, we rented a car.
Right.
I think I don't remember this specific quote, but I'm used to walking a lot, and so the blocks were really big around where we were.
The blocks are very long. You know, the blocks, they're short here. I want to get into this issue of Vancouver livability, the storied, legendary Vancouver livability. You're a lifelong Vancouverite.
Mm-hmm.
Does the city seem as fantastically livable when you've spent your whole life here?
That's one of those things that they always do, like these UN studies and travel magazines.
Monocle magazine.
Yeah, Vancouver is the most livable city.
It's Vancouver and Zurich.
Yeah. And like there's always 2 or 3 Swiss ones on there.
Yes.
But like I guess because I'm from here, I don't know what other cities are like to live in. Like do people just drop dead in the middle, in most cities?
Corpse stacks.
Yeah. I don't know what livable really means.
Right.
Like, they come up with these indexes, and they include, I guess, sort of, amenities and healthcare and...
Right. Block length.
The block length,
sure.
Yeah. Transit.
Exactly. There's the numbers... They use as many numbers as they can. They quantify as much as they can, but the debate is always like a Vancouver or a Portland or a Zurich. We've got all the quantifiable stuff down. Should we fear that we will become a less exciting metropolis because of that? Do you consider Vancouver to be an exciting place?
No.
No.
It's well known as like
No Fun City.
No
right?
Fun City, no Funcouver.
No fun. No, I've never heard the No Funcouver, the mashup. Intriguing.
It's very intriguing. It's like people. Music venues shut down all the time with no explanation. There's the liquor laws. Apparently, there's like Canada did have prohibition for a much shorter time than the United States, and but locally, what I had heard was that it wasn't completely repealed. So there are like a bunch of bylaws that basically make it legal to drink, but there's also like I've been in bars where. Technically, like I have a beer in my hand, and if I'm not sitting down, technically I'm dancing. So I've had like staff walk by and put a stool under my butt.
Oh my God!
Because if my feet are on the floor, it's illegal.
Things have gone that far.
Yeah.
Huh. Tell me, in the city of No Vancouver, what does it take to become an icon of fun that is a comedian in No Vancouver?
I'm not an icon. I think you're referring to
the comedian.
The comedian,
the icon of good times
okay.
and professional resentment.
Just to clarify,
yes.
It's difficult. Like you're especially in the summer. That's a big thing. Comedians hate the summer here because there's so much to compete with.
Oh.
Like the audience is. They go to a show at 9:00. The sun's still out. They can be out. It's only dry here for 2 months a year, and so people want to be out. You're competing with the outdoors. You're also competing like if there's any hockey happening late into the spring, then it is. That's the only thing people care about here.
No, and hockey season can almost be always, right? Nearly always.
Yeah, no, it can go into June and starts basically up in September. So
your podcast, Stop Podcasting Yourself, reveals though that there are comedians in Vancouver, and no small amount, right? I mean, tell me how much of the comedy scene you had unearthed before beginning Stop Podcasting Yourself. 2007 or 8? When did you first start?
We started in 2008. I guess we had, like, Graham and I have been doing comedy. He's been at it longer than I have.
Your co-host on
yes,
SPY.
Graham Clark. He started, I guess, in the early 2000s. I started when I was, I guess, about 2005. And so we had a few years of knowing each other and doing comedy together, and knowing. So when we finally came up with the idea of doing a podcast, we knew Vancouver had this really great comedy community, and we were really inspired by Jimmy Pardo's podcast, Never Not Funny, because he had all these guests. Certainly when he started, all these guests who were hilarious and I had never heard of, and so we were like, well, we know a bunch of people who are hilarious that no one's ever heard of,
right? And
I've had so much fun just having casual conversations with them. Why don't we start recording those? So we had kind of unearthed. We were really familiar with the comedy scene and who would be good guests on the show, and who wouldn't be. And sometimes, we guess wrong.
Yeah, I do an interview show, as you're hearing right now, by being on it, and I always get the, "Who was your worst guest?" I hate that question.
Oh yeah,
do you hate that question? It's worst guest is such a wide variety of meanings. Like, what do you mean worst? Who is how? There's so many ways a guest can be bad, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. As I'm demonstrating.
You.
Yeah. No. It's a bit of a crapshoot sometimes if it's a first timer. Sometimes, like, we have tried and true guests that we look forward to.
Many of your guests are non-Vancouver based, but do you try to make this a showcase of Vancouver comedy? Stop Podcasting Yourself, or Vancouver entertainment? I don't know. Is there a Vancouvericity you want to maintain?
No, I don't think. I don't think that explicitly we do. I think it comes out pretty naturally with the fact that we both live here, and we talk about what we do in the course of every show. Like every show, we get to know us. We talk about.
This is the first segment on every show.
Yeah, we talk about what our week has been like, and so usually Graham has some story of someone on the bus who's annoyed him, and I talk about staying inside as much as possible.
Right. Well, you've got lots of space in here. You don't live in one of these condos 27 stories up with no room to turn around, which is the classic Vancouver lifestyle, as I understand. Now classic.
In the last 20 years.
This is the classic.
Yeah, this is
pre-classic.
I live in a 100-year-old house.
Right.
But the last 20 years, it's been sort of the city of glass.
Yes. It's a book I read often before Douglas Copeland's City of Glass, before visiting Vancouver every time. I mean, are there two Vancouvers in that sense? The Vancouver over here and the glittering Vancouver up there?
I think there's probably several Vancouvers. And
are we talking 500 Vancouvers?
Yeah, there's 500 parallel Vancouvers.
You kill the 499 other Vancouvers to become the most powerful Vancouver.
Yeah, every year we do a Hunger Games style thing, which is citywide. There's, I guess, like, it's weird because when I went to broadcasting school, a bunch of my classmates were from the suburbs of Vancouver, and
a New Westminster, Surrey,
a Coquitlam, a Langley, Maple Ridge, and they would talk about where I lived, which is East Vancouver. They would refer to that as downtown. Everywhere within the actual city bounds of Vancouver, they were referred to as downtown.
And someone living in one of those condos would not say this is downtown.
Absolutely not. And people...
It spit on you from their height.
Yeah, people who live in those condos, like, consider this the suburbs in a lot of senses. They're like, oh, but isn't it a pain having to get in your car and drive 5 minutes?
That's kind of a pain, though, isn't it? Getting in your car, driving 5 minutes.
Oh, man, it's the worst.
Just the drive itself is fine, but the sort of like, I got to turn the key and get in.
What's...
car payments. Was this the case since you have known Vancouver? I would guess we're about the same age. I mean, most of those towers went up in the 90s, so you saw this distant thing growing, right? And you were like, what's going on over there? Or how much visibly has this city changed since you've been around?
It's not something I really paid attention to as a child.
Yeah, as kids don't.
Yeah, you just like, oh, cool, look at that building.
You wake up as an adult and did you wake up as an adult and find you were in a cool city in some sense? Like, hey, this place isn't bad.
Yeah, I guess so. I went to university in Victoria, which is a couple hours away. But other than that, I've lived here the whole time. And I think I sort of, you sort of, as a kid, like, before you can drive, before you really know, like... where anything is, and people just sort of take you places, or you get on the bus and you end up at school.
It's magic.
Yeah, you don't really think about how the city's connected or where anything is.
You don't really know what a road is as a kid, I recall. It's like, you just point-to-point teleportation sort of feeling.
And like as a kid, I lived on the west side. I currently live on the east side. I remember driving to where I am now as a kid, and it was like... It was the longest drive. It's
another world.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. You said you went to broadcasting school and that Vancouver may not be the media capital of Canada. Was there some pressure like, first, when did you know you wanted to get into broadcasting? Second, was there a sense like the inevitable, I guess I got to go to Toronto? Like in America, you'd say Los Angeles or New York.
Yeah. It's weird. Because there is that pull. When I went into broadcasting school, I went in for TV and film, and at the time Vancouver had like a thriving television and movie industry, which has sort of suffered in the last few years, because of tax breaks going away and.
Louisiana's stealing your thunder.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Shreveport.
Oh, God.
And
tell me about it.
The Canadian dollar has become stronger, and like a lot of production has moved over to Toronto. There's still some here, but it's less. So at the time, it was like, okay, I'll just work in local TV and movies. And then I started doing comedy. And there's even more of like a pull to Toronto once you start doing comedy.
Really?
Yeah, because it's like no one's ever going to see you here. Especially, this was 2005. YouTube didn't exist. Podcasts didn't exist. And so, but I've never really felt the pull to go to Toronto. I only visited Toronto for the first time when I was like 20, maybe 30. Yeah.
And was it covered in snow?
It was not.
Visit?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, actually, it did snow. It was March and it snowed.
It just wasn't covered.
No,
yet.
yeah, exactly.
I see. In any case, do you think you had to make the choice to keep your allegiance to Vancouver, or that was the default because I like it better here, or this is just, the place where I am?
Yeah, it's weird because I never felt like I had to keep my allegiance here, but it is pretty easy to...
Livable.
Yeah, it's
very livable.
It's what I understand. But I have sort of that feeling of like, people who live in a small town and they never leave it. And you're like, oh, you feel sorry for those people. But like, at what point, what is a small town? Like, am I stuck in this rut here in Vancouver with our, 2 million people? I've been at other places. It just seems like a hassle to pick up and move.
It does. But I would imagine it seems impossible wanting to get into comedy and broadcasting. Like, as we discussed, it seems a little bit impossible to have a career in Vancouver. Clearly, though, you do. So is there some odds beating that goes on?
Certainly. Most of my career is the fact that I work in at CBC.
Right.
That pays the bills. But so there's definitely odds beating. There's not too many jobs out there.
Right.
But part of it is like in your 20s, there's not a lot of opportunities for you anywhere.
That's true. Like, you are sort of society's cast off at that time.
Why can't I make it in Vancouver? Well, try somewhere else, or
get shat on somewhere.
Yeah. Or
because it's going to happen.
Or maybe go get a degree that's worth something instead of your Bachelor of the Arts.
Indeed. Tell me about, as I mentioned, having your finger on the pulse of the Canadian consciousness that I assume you have by working at the CBC.
Mm-hmm. Oh, is that the question?
That's the question. Tell me what that's like.
I don't really have my finger on the pulse of the Canadian consciousness. I work at CBC Music, which is our music website, and I create content, and I sort of have a finger on the pulse of Canadian music,
right?
But even then, my job is more on the international music side. But I can say Canada does have a very strong music scene.
Indeed, it's
stronger than the comedy scene, I would say.
Really? Why?
I think just in general, music seems cooler than comedy.
Does it? That seems like it might be changing, though, because of, I don't know if it's just a perception I get from podcasting or if podcasting is a part of it, but comedians are in the zeitgeist more than they have been in my lifetime. Does it seem that way to you?
Probably, yeah, because of the not even comedians, but like the comedian's lifestyle. Like
the comedian's lifestyle.
Yeah, like you learn about, Louis C.K. and Mark Maron doing, exposing so much of his life to his hundreds of thousands of listeners, or however many, I have no idea. I feel like comedians have sort of always been near the, one of the things, like musician, comedian, actor. These are
policeman, fireman.
These are the jobs.
Those are the jobs when you're a kid.
Those are the jobs on TV.
Right. The jobs with uniforms.
But I'd say that music is like more. I think music will always be cooler because the idea of people hanging out together, friends in a van, traveling place to place, it is a lot more romantic than the comedian by himself in a hotel room.
Does it make sense to talk about the world of Canadian music, or are we talking about just North American music? Is there much of a distinction to draw between what Canadians listen to from the world, or is it just like
There is a bit of a distinction. We do sort of in Canada. We have something called Canadian content.
Yes,
where I think
CanCon.
Something like 35% of the music you hear on the radio is Canadian, and they
defined as
I think there's four like criteria it needs to meet, and I think it needs to meet 2 or 3 of these criteria to be considered Canadian. The music has to be written by a Canadian. The artist must be Canadian. It must be produced in Canada, and the lyrics must be by a Canadian. MAPL, maple.
Maple. You guys like those leaves?
Yeah.
I rarely have heard a Canadian have any kind words for Canadian content laws as they currently exist. Are you going to be the one to defend them here?
No. I think it's sort of charming the fact that we've sort of created or helped out the industry up north. In a lot of ways, there are kind of Canadian knockoffs of mainstream American artists.
Is this the same as Christian rock, where there's equivalents, knockoffs to the
maybe
bigger ones?
Yeah, but there's...
I'm going to ask about Canadian Christian rock next, so
great.
Gird your loins.
Sure, I'll try to think of one artist. I think it is sort of charming, and I have a fondness for all like Candy in the Backbeat and Soul Decision.
Sure. That sounds vaguely... Soul Decision sounds vaguely familiar.
Yeah,
to
I think they had a breakthrough hit in the States.
I talk to people about Vancouver's creators, the voices of Vancouver. The names you expect come up. You know, your Douglas Copelands, your William Gibsons, both of whom are on deadlines and unavailable this trip of mine to Vancouver. But you know, I'll be back. The photographer Jeff Wall. Why has Vancouver stopped considering Nickelback their native sons?
They're from Alberta.
That's a good reason. I thought, you know what? It's because of the story. I think that story where one of the band members worked at Starbucks and kept having to say, "Here's your Nickelback," happened in Vancouver. Yeah, I thought that meant they were from Vancouver.
Well, I believe they're all from Alberta, Hanna, Alberta, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
But they formed in Vancouver, I believe.
So there's a certain Vancouver content.
Oh, absolutely. There. And I think they all live in the area. And they became a band, like they became a Vancouver band. They formed, I think they won a local Battle of the Bands radio competition.
So there was a time when they were Vancouver only. Yeah. Like Nickelback was a Vancouver band. You could see them 3 nights a week somewhere.
Probably, yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, no, we've disowned them because they're terrible.
Sure, but as it seems like you've alluded to, terribleness is not a reason to disown a Canadian band necessarily.
No, they are like they go above and beyond.
They are aggressively the way they are.
I mean, terribleness, with regard to what maybe gets on the radio that shouldn't.
I see.
It is one thing, but they are like the torchbearers.
True. They're international. They've made themselves internationally bad, haven't they?
Yeah.
Like, their badness is not specific to a nation anymore.
And for about like the last decade, they've been the go-to band for like, you want to make fun of a bad band. This is the band you make fun of. There's nothing that's really replaced them yet. Right.
It's true. You mentioned Soul Decision's crossover hit. I think of Nickelback having their crossover hit in about 2001, and I think to myself, that was a time when Nickelback could have a song that everybody knew. Mm-hmm. Everybody. Does that mean the early 2000s were really as bad a cultural time as we think?
I don't know. I really have. Whenever someone points to a decade being bad or a time
I'm saying a few years. 99 to 2005.
The new metal phenomenon, the Woodstock 99.
Woodstock 99 ushered in this period, perhaps.
Yeah. Maybe. That one song, that one crossover Nickelback hit, this is controversial, but that was a good song.
I mean,
I don't like the guy's voice.
They replicated it a few times afterwards,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
you know there was something to it.
Yeah, but it's I think it's a well-written song. How You Remind Me.
Yes. I'm sure, listeners, it comes right back to your mind if you
pause this and go.
Yes, go load it on YouTube, listen to it, then load the thing that lines up that song with the next big song they had, where they sound very similar.
Right. Yeah.
I know there was some editing, but it's still pretty funny. I
Yeah.
think you'll agree. I often listen to a CBC 2 show called The Signal. Is that still running?
I think so.
Yeah, because I had Lori Brown, the host of it, on this show a long time ago, or on this show's predecessor, and I was telling her, I think I wouldn't hear this in the States, and it's not just because of the Canadian content. It does seem to me there is a different listening sensibility in Canada. I mean, I'm talking specifically about the radio, not just music, but CBC radio always sounds different to me. And I'm saying in a sense better. And I'm maybe because it doesn't have to please 300 million people. I don't know. I mean, I guess you're employed by the CBC, so I'm not asking you to say better or worse, but what is it? What do you think makes the CBC listening experience different from public radio or whatever in other English-speaking countries? Or what might make it different?
I don't know. It's like there's certainly some kind of quaintness to it.
Really?
Our friends Pat and Pete host a show called This Is That, which is a comedy show that is like just a over-the-top satire of CBC, and so
I've got to listen to this.
Yeah, they've talked. You know, they do all these stories about sort of plausible things that could happen in Canada, and actually all around the world. Like they did one story about the Calgary aquarium is shutting down with a big goodbye fish barbecue, and there's just these real stories, these fake stories
real seeming fake stories.
Yeah, that have sort of gained them a lot of attention, and they seem to hit the note of Canadian broadcasting of that's kind of like quaint. They only do 2 or 3 voices between the two of them, but they're like these super Canadian voices.
What is most satirizable about Canadian media?
I think the low budget of it.
Really?
Like,
I don't hear like sets falling down in the, you know, it doesn't seem like ramshackle.
No, but like Canadian television is
I've never seen the TV. I'm told from friends who live here, you might like CBC radio, but watch 5 seconds of the television and you'll know that you're going to be seeing a lot of cats up trees.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how something looks Canadian, but it does. Like,
this is what I want to get at.
Yeah.
Looking Canadian.
Growing up, my brother had a really good eye for this, and he'd be like, oh yeah, that commercial's Canadian, that's American. And I could never, you could never really put your finger on what made something look Canadian, but it was just, you were like, this isn't as good as.
Isn't as good? I feel like I am more pleased by these Canadian things very often. It's not like, man, this is abrasively Canadian.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, abrasively Canadian is not even a term that makes sense,
No,
right?
It's an oxymoron.
It's a direct contradiction.
Yeah, I think the radio is where we shine, because television and movies. I've maybe seen 3 Canadian movies in my life.
3 good ones or 3 ones?
3 ones.
Oh my! Any recommendable? Because I was looking for a Vancouver movie. I haven't seen the one that Douglas Copeland wrote, Everything's Gone Green, but I hear it's not bad.
Oh, I haven't seen that, but I don't know exactly. Like, I'm sorry that this interview is turning into, I can't put my finger on that.
Well, this is Canadian, not being able to put your finger quite on the nature of Canada. Mm-hmm. It seems to be a theme here. I mean, Vancouver, there are certain qualities you can describe. Canada, you get into murkier territory. But I wonder, you still see the productions we alluded to shooting here in Vancouver, Backlot North, Hollywood North, they call it. But usually it's representing Seattle on screen or something. Yeah. I mean, growing up in Vancouver, do you have some sense like, I want to see a Vancouver story? I want to see Vancouver actually be Vancouver? Yeah. I want to see my hometown be real?
There is a little bit of that, of like, there's stories here. Why?
Right.
But whenever they, try to tell them, it always just looks like Like, I've seen trailers for Canadian movies, and I'm like, oh, this is supposed to be gritty, but it's just like,
I see.
this is my, alleyways behind my house.
Gritty is maybe the wrong tack to take for Vancouver. It's
Muddy might be better.
Muddy, maybe. I mean, I have read articles about Vancouver that do try to underscore the grittiness. They'll talk about, we talked about the scarred hookers of Hastings Street before we got on mic. They'll really put a line under
You talked about it. Well,
yeah, I see. I did bring it up. That's true. You didn't say no. You didn't stop me.
Well, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation.
But grittiness is not an overarching Vancouver quality. Is it? There are pockets, but you wouldn't talk about the mean streets of Vancouver, other than that one.
Yeah, no, even that one, it's not.
You can still walk down it.
Yeah, you're not going to get mugged.
Right.
It's just more sad than scary.
And there are cops on it. They're just walking around, though.
Yeah, there's a police station on
it.
Right. Yeah, no, Vancouver isn't gritty.
What is it?
Muddy. I said muddy.
Sure. What's interesting in Vancouver? You want to hear Vancouver stories told or see them told. There are stories here. What are the specific stories? What kinds of stories are here?
I don't know. There's not, it's hard because the city doesn't have a ton of flow. Like, there is divisions between neighborhoods. There is your real estate prices are out of control, and
yes.
Like there's a lot of people who can afford houses, and then people who can afford to live in the basements of these houses.
Right, sure. The Great Divide.
Yeah.
I understand.
So it's yeah, I don't know. Maybe I misspoke when I said there are stories here.
Maybe you meant there were no stories.
Yeah, that's a common mistake I can make. But yeah, no, like I remember, I think it was what is that Ice-T movie where he's driving? It's Are We There Yet? I think it's Are We There Yet?
Ice Cube.
Sorry, pardon me. Ice Cube, yes. Right.
There's, I think, 3 in that series, so
yes.
Take your pick.
Are we there yet? Are we done yet? Are we still making a movie?
Yes. Are we still in production?
But I believe someone told me that one of the plot points was he has to drive from Portland, Oregon to Vancouver, British Columbia with these kids in the back of his car. And I was blown away that they actually...
The name Vancouver was spoken in a movie.
Yeah. Oh.
In a major motion picture with a rapper.
Oh. And that's one of the things I think maybe from these growing up with that sort of little younger brother syndrome in this city is like we'd get very excited to I see Vancouver in that movie. I mean, it's supposed to be
Spot the Vancouver though was the game.
Yeah, Rumble in the Bronx, the Jackie Chan movie was shot here, and you're like, oh, do they have mountains in the Bronx?
That's not the Bronx. That's not the Bronx at all. There's not a lot of Toronto movies either, right? I mean, Canadian cities do not usually be themselves.
It's not super sexy.
I mean, Toronto, again, Douglas Copeland described that as the phone book made real. The phone book made 3-dimensional into a city.
Toronto's fun. Toronto's
I'll probably go there next season for the show.
Yeah,
so.
it's a good...
I hope so.
It's a good place to go. I mean, I'd sort of heard it badmouth my whole life. And then,
really?
Then when I went... when I was 30, I had a ton of fun.
Is Toronto the terrible big city from the eyes of Vancouver? In the eyes of Vancouver?
It's sort of like how the joke. One of the jokes about Toronto is how many Torontonians does it take to screw in a light bulb? All of them. One to hold it, and the rest to make the world revolve around Toronto.
Oh, sure. They have to. Someone's got to turn that world.
Yeah.
But that's the attitude there, huh?
And I work in media, and like we see our stats every day, and it's like, it's 2 p.m. here in Vancouver. Toronto's gone home for the day. It's 5 p.m. there. Look at our stats drop off. Like it makes sense. Like so much of Canada's population is in that area,
right,
and that time zone. So it's. I mean, there's. They merit this kind of whatever kind of attention they get.
Do you get the sense that Toronto sucks away more comedians from Vancouver's comedy pool, or do the states do that? Or what's pulling away some of the, when it's a shame to see someone go, what's usually pulling them away?
It's usually Toronto. It's expensive to go to the States.
Right.
You need to get a visa to work as a comedian in the States, it's thousands of dollars.
Comedian visa.
Yeah.
Oh. Didn't even know it. If you could just go illegally and then hope for the best.
Yeah, some people have tried that.
Right.
But the other way around, it's like comedians can come to Vancouver, no problem.
Oh,
like,
really?
Can come to Canada, no problem.
Give us your laughter.
Yeah, exactly. But you're keeping us away. So yeah, many more go to Toronto, but it's never it's never like, oh, it's sad to see you go, because there's kind of a feeling that you'll be back.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
There's the boomerang thing with Vancouver.
Yeah, it's like, oh, this guy's moving to LA. I'm really going to miss him for 2 months.
Really? That happens where they intend to stay away from Vancouver, but what is the circumstance? Either their heart is in Vancouver, or they just don't like it where they go, or maybe that's the same thing. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe it is. But yeah, like it's I don't know, because it's not easy here, but it's hard everywhere, I guess.
Right.
So like they were maybe expecting like, okay, well, once I get somewhere, once I get to Toronto or LA, things are going to really open up for me. But I mean, it's probably easier to be a big fish in a small pond. Right.
And I wonder what the temptation is to how viable is it when you're a comedian in Vancouver to joke about stuff that only Vancouverites could laugh at?
That's a problem everywhere. Like,
yeah, true. But how possible is it here to be like, I'm going to joke about Vancouver, and there are going to be things insiders will only laugh? I mean, how much of that material is there?
I mean, there's tons of stuff to make fun of.
Really? What do you like to make fun of in Vancouver?
Oh,
when you really want to play to the home audience.
I mostly make fun of the I'm a real homebody, so I make fun of the active lifestyle here, and
it does seem very popular to wear a Lululemon pant.
And the fact that people here do, wear workout clothes to work. Like they will wear
I noticed that.
Stretch pants to their jobs as waitresses.
But is that something you saw happen, the descent of the stretch pants in Vancouver? Did you notice that while it was going on?
Yeah, that was a big thing. That was like...
What year did you see that happening?
Oh, I'd say about 10 years ago, the Lululemon sort of yoga pant craze.
Like, what's going on there? These aren't really pants, but they're not pants.
Yeah, I mean, I guess women can call it whatever they want pants.
True.
Men can't.
Yes, they have a wider spectrum of what's categorizable as a certain type of clothing. But you can satirize that, the athletic wear. In what other ways does Vancouver make itself an easy target for its own?
Jeez, I don't know. I mean, like, it's not the active wear, it's the active lifestyle. It's the fact that the sun's out, people immediately want to climb a mountain or go kayaking or go hiking in one of our, without leaving the city.
Right.
There's this contemptible idea that in one day you can go skiing and windsurfing.
Contemptible idea.
Yeah, I mean, like, nobody does this.
Right.
Like, but people say, oh yeah, it's one of those days. You can check out the white caps on the mountain and the white caps on the water. Why
would I go anywhere? Why would I live in any other city in the world? Because I can theoretically do that thing I never do.
Yeah, exactly.
I see.
So livable.
Is that an engine of complacency of any kind? Just you can luxuriate in the idea that you could be active if you felt like it?
Yeah, I think that might be part of it, because there's so much of I think so much of every city is like the tourist stuff. If I'm in Paris, I don't go up the Eiffel Tower every day. I don't go to the Arc de Triomphe. I don't go to the Louvre every day, but it's there.
Right.
So it's sort of this idea that, like, oh yeah, we live in Vancouver, we can do all this stuff, but it's raining most of the time. Let's not let's temper our enthusiasm.
Does that
like that TV show, Temper Your Enthusiasm?
Sure, I'm well aware of Temper Your Enthusiasm. It's going into a new season. Does that sense that you could kayak and climb a mountain in one day, I mean, is it like, what if I want to go drink and watch a comedian? Well, maybe you should be in Lululemon pants, kayaking and climbing a mountain, like that sense of pressure for the active lifestyle, does that take away from the possibilities for comedy?
Yeah,
in any sense?
I think it does. I mean, I talked about that earlier about how like once the sun comes out, it's death for comedians here because people want to be outside, and you can be outside, till 10 or 11 at night. There's patios open and stuff. But yeah, I like it. I don't know why. I mean, the city has a reputation as being no fun, but I think that
it's fun every time I visit.
Yeah,
but I'm a visitor.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't live here. I don't know if there's a stark divide. Like if I was here for 6 months, if I would say, "Oh, okay, I see."
But I think people correctly categorize exercise as not fun.
Right. You think they're doing fine on that count.
Yeah.
There's a lot of exercise, and there sometimes is no fun. What came first for you, comedy or broadcasting as an interest?
I guess it probably was broadcasting. Although as a kid, I sort of liked the idea of comedy, but I guess when I was a kid, I maybe wanted to make movies or TV or something.
I want to make something people see or hear.
Yeah, I want to goof off for a little.
Yeah, right.
And then I realized you can do that with comedy,
right,
as well. But it was sort of like only when I was 23 or 24 I realized, comedians exist here.
Oh,
like,
in Vancouver.
Yeah, like right. That's a thing that people do.
You have to go looking for the comedy, though?
Sometimes. I mean, like there are the big clubs.
Right.
There's a couple clubs in town that Tuesday to Saturday have comedy every night. But then there's a bunch of, places that do it once a month or once a week. And those are generally the better shows because they're locals who are having actual fun and, maybe not getting paid, but able to experiment and put on, great unexpected shows. So I sort of realized, actually it was my co-host, Graham Clark, hosted a show called The Laugh Gallery at this little Salvadoran restaurant. And I only discovered that because
Papusas all around.
Yeah, exactly. I only discovered that because Zach Galifianakis, I had become interested in him in like 2003 thereabouts, and so I went to his website and I wanted to see if he was ever coming to Vancouver, and he was. He was playing this tiny little restaurant that I had never heard of, so I called them up and I said, "Can I get tickets to this thing?" And they spoke very little English, and I eventually realized that the restaurant has nothing to do with the actual show. It's the comedian or promoter who's putting it on. So we went to go see Zach Galifianakis at this show, and we there was no time on the website or anything. Right. It was just like, let's show up at 7:30, and the show started at 9. So
you put down a lot of pupusas.
Yeah, exactly.
Before 9 came around.
And then Graham Clark hosted this show, and there were about 6 or 7 local comedians on, and then Zach Galifianakis at the end of the night. And it blew my mind that you don't have to be famous to be on a show with this guy.
Oh,
like
yes.
you can just be a comedian, and you can be hilarious, and you can get stage time, and the people you're on stage with might be super huge, hilarious comedians. So that sort of got me interested.
How viable did doing a podcast seem as an avenue for developing in comedy when you started? Stop podcasting yourself with Graham Clark.
We had no idea. Like it was, there weren't very many podcasts. We didn't like the first few years. I mean, every conversation was, "Oh, you have a podcast. What is that?"
Right.
So it wasn't.
Is that a video?
Yeah, exactly. It's like people weren't so much interested in the content of it as like, "Oh, can I get that on my computer?" So it was a lot of like explaining to my parents' friends.
Oh, sure.
What that is.
It's a hard road to hoe.
Yeah. And so there was like, we had no expectations. We didn't know we would be able to keep it up. That was sort of our only I think probably the wisest choice, because it was my idea, and I was like, who do I do this with?
Right.
And I picked Graham, and I think that the wisest thing, beyond him being hilarious and a great host, was that he committed to it immediately, and we've done it every single week since. And that, like, especially in the early days before anyone knew about podcasting, and like before there was any chance of getting our name out there or making any money at it, it was really common to see someone start up a podcast and then 6 months later,
pod fade, they call it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe it's every week, and then maybe it's a couple times a month, and then maybe it's we'll let you know when the next
we're
one's
back.
up.
Yeah, it's been a while. Not pod fading is one thing. Doing it every week keeps you on a cut above in terms of the genre you're doing. Comedians talking. It's not really. I think the door might be closed on that nowadays. And do you know what I mean? Like, you guys got in.
Yeah.
But I don't think a comedians talking podcast is necessarily viable in 2013 to begin.
Yeah, but I've also felt that for the last couple of years, and they still keep starting up. And there's ones that are pretty new that I still listen to.
Right.
So yeah, it does feel like people. I think once or twice people have written and said, "Oh, hey, what's the best way to start a podcast?" And I'm like, well, go back 3 years.
Right.
And then, but I mean, now I think the best way to start a podcast is to do something different. Like,
right.
when we did it, we didn't have any concept. We still don't have any concept. Like, it's just us talking.
Yes. You have segments though. You have some regular features.
Yeah. But now, like, I think Who Charted is a great example of, like, every week we'll take a look at what's on the charts, and we'll get to know our guests because of they're familiar with music and movies, and
right.
So I think that's a like, if there was someone's just starting a podcast of just chatting, I think that would be it's a crowded marketplace at this point.
It certainly is, and you guys usually have a guest. Do you see it as an opportunity to somehow learn more about comedy itself when you have another comedian in here? You think, I'm going to get some lessons of how this comedian does or doesn't do what they do well or don't do well. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, we don't really, because like my first thing to do is I jump onto the weirdest thing, or like the most boring thing about their day-to-day life, like whatever they're talking about, and then.
But that's a test, because if you jump on the most boring thing and they can fire back, they've got something. They've got the chops.
Yeah, but like, I don't want to hear about, I'm a comedian, and I was at this club, and the interesting thing about my experience, and
but it tells you more about them, doesn't it? If you jump onto something obscure or nonsensical.
Oh,
about them.
Like, if there is, something about what they ate for breakfast, and it's weird to me. I'm like, oh, what you have rice for breakfast? Like, even something as boring as that, like, that'll get us off on a tangent. The last thing I want to talk about is your thought process writing jokes, and
right, because no one has a good answer, do they?
I don't know.
It's just a principle of interviewing, isn't it? You can't directly ask something like that. You've got to come off the side, go through the breakfast rice and see what you can infer.
And there are podcasts that do, like, really talk about the comedian's experience, and like, what do you prefer in a club, and what about these situations, and what nights are best, and what's the best temperature.
I see. We talked a little bit about what a shame, I'll miss that guy for 2 months while he's in Los Angeles before he boomerangs back to Vancouver. Do you meet many Vancouver comedians through Stop Podcasting Yourself or otherwise, where you think it's a shame this guy or lady has not been sucked away by Toronto or the States yet? Like, you have a broad appeal, so you shouldn't be in Vancouver. Do you ever think about that? I mean, but your show has a broad appeal, and it is in Vancouver, so. That might just be the internet making things a little easier for everyone.
It is sort of the internet, yeah. Like, I think I don't feel like people are wasting away here. I think now with the internet, and like people go on tour all the time and they go to festivals, and people can have really good careers based out of Vancouver.
Now is the time, if any time, to be based in Vancouver, right? Because you can.
Yeah. And so it's, like there are people I'm definitely rooting for.
Right.
But I don't necessarily feel like, what is it? Goodwill Hunting, where one day I knock on your door and you won't be there, and it'll be the happiest day of my life.
Right. You don't have that particular speech. But I do wonder, as I have said, as a visitor to Vancouver, it does seem fun, where people who live here will tell me that it isn't fun. It seems like a pretty major city, whereas Canadians will say this is not a major city. It seems like the things I experience here, I then get contradicted by the locals like, no. I mean, is this just some kind of modesty, Canadian modesty, or is there really that much of a difference in the perception of a place like Vancouver, the visitor and the resident?
I mean, I think there is every city. Like you were talking about how much fun it is here, and I was talking earlier about every time I've been to Toronto, it's been so much fun, and that's probably because I'm seeing people who I know who are excited to see me, and I'm staying out late every night. I don't have a job to go to.
Nice, that's a plus.
But that's the thing about every city. Like you being on vacation is great. Indeed. So when you come to Vancouver and you're on vacation, you see the positive sides. When you're here and you're on a crowded bus and it stinks because everyone is either homeless or on, stinks of pot or has been sprayed by a skunk. And
which line is this where this happens?
Oh, I mean, the number 8 is a good one. That's one to avoid.
Vancouver tips. We're on. Don't ride the 8.
Yeah, well, I mean, it goes where you need to go, then ride it. The 99 is always packed. So like you can't sit on the 99, and that's a bus that comes every minute. Like not quite, but it's like
near enough.
It's the east to west bus.
I see.
And so like it's a great place to live on the good days, but there's also a lot that can bum you out about it.
Right. What do you recommend to avoid getting bummed for newbies to Vancouver neophytes? As a lifelong Vancouverite, you have a store of wisdom, I assume.
Sure. I don't know. Like, because people are like, oh, how do you meet people here? I don't know. I know enough people. I don't need to meet more people.
You're done. You're de-meeting people at this point.
My meeting card is full.
Is that an actual problem, though, in Vancouver, meeting people?
I think it is, because people are kind of unfriendly here.
There is the fabled Jan Morris smile test where she wrote, in every city she goes to, she smiles actively at everyone who passes, and Vancouver did the absolute worst at returning the smiles. I take it that's not alien to the experience of Vancouver.
No, and I've noticed that in other cities, people actually saying hello to you. Like if
the first time that happened, were you sort of
and sometimes it'll happen here, but it's like a reflex. Like it's really late. Like they've sized you up. They've so they'll say hello like literally as you're passing, and you feel like a jerk because you can't return it in time.
I see.
So I think it's hard to meet people here. I haven't been really single as an adult. I think it's probably hard to meet someone, romantically here as well.
Right. It's hard to meet someone.
Yeah.
I see. In Vancouver.
We don't have those closets where you can go in for 7 minutes at a time.
Exactly. I don't know. How can the city be livable if you don't have those? It must have been a shock then, the first time you came to the States and people kept saying stuff to you.
Yeah. Oh, it's not even just the States. Like out east, they're more friendly as well. It is a shock, and I'm not great at talking to strangers, despite the fact that I have a podcast where I kind of do. It's
a good way to get yourself doing it. I suppose.
Exactly. I'm not great at, especially small talk interactions. Like I don't know how to chat up a barista
go straight to the big stuff, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know how well that works.
How's your retirement plan looking?
I understand real estate is the main subject of conversation in Vancouver. Is this correct?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things, that and the weather.
I see. Which is, as you've said, wet.
Wet.
The real estate is expensive.
Expensive, yeah. Oh, will this bubble burst? Oh, I think the bubble's about to burst. I don't know about this bubble bursting. Oh, can you believe what this house... There's a website around online. I don't know the exact name of it, but it's like Crack Shack or Mansion.
Crack Shack or Mansion.
And it's it'll show you a picture of a house, and you have to guess whether it is a crack shack or a mansion. And usually... It'll end up being like all the dilapidated houses. You click on Crack Shack and it'll say, nope, this sold for $1.5 million.
I guess if they were all the predictable ones, it wouldn't be much of a website.
Yeah, exactly.
You have this segment on Stop Podcasting Yourself, overheard and accompanied by overseen. Things you hear and see around town. How much ridiculousness can you pull out of these main Vancouver themes you overhear about? The weather, the real estate, the stretch pants.
I think the main source of our overheards and overseens comes from transit. The fact that people will ride a bus or a train for hours a day and will let their guards down and start answer phone calls they shouldn't have, or talk too loud to someone sitting next to them. But yeah, no, I don't know if we or our listeners really hang in the real estate community.
Yeah, I suppose not. Podcasting is still, it's widening. The demographic is widening. I don't know if it's to real estate owners yet.
No, exactly.
It might sooner or later be getting there. I don't know if the listeners or the podcasters will be owning land first, but certainly it's a race between them, right? That's
what Nostradamus predicted. I almost said Nosferatu.
just as Nosferatu predicted. Tell me about your favorite sources of ridiculousness, personally.
Oh, what do you mean?
Well,
follow-up question. What do you mean?
Where proves most fruitful for the type of ridiculousness you can then use in comedy, be it podcasting, be it any form. Just because you mentioned that the sources of ridiculousness on overheard, they usually come from transit. They're not usually real estate conversations. Where does your own eye track when it's looking for the ridiculous in life?
Mostly transit still, yeah. No, I do. I really do like the idea of someone being dumb and not knowing they're being dumb and like thinking they're smart. Oh, it's classic because it works.
And everywhere in the world you encounter this.
Everywhere when I look in the mirror, that's probably be like my greatest fear is like, oh, I hope people don't think I'm dumb, and I'm dumb all the time.
You hope people don't think you're dumb, but attempting to appear smart. That's the other half of it, right?
Right. So yeah,
if someone's just dumb and upfront about it, it's not ridiculous.
I think that's maybe my reflex is I pretend to be even dumber than I am.
Do you consider that a component of your podcasting persona?
I try
dumbing yourself.
If it works, yeah. Like I think that is the greatest thing. Like someone, so I try to.
But you want to still make smart jokes and but if you can do it through a dumbified persona, is that a net increase to the comedy?
I mean, it's hard to sort of break down the net increases to comedy, but
consult the PDF listeners for more diagrams.
I think like I like making a smart joke, but I really like if I can seem really dumb. That I don't like lock into that persona often enough because sometimes we're recording the show and I'll just like forget. Sure. Let me be an idiot.
You'll be all business for a moment.
Well, I want to keep the conversation going forward, and it can sort of derail the flow of things if I or anyone is just like putting on a putting on a persona that's not true and that you can't necessarily keep up for 90 minutes.
Yes, indeed. Finally, what sense do you get of what Vancouver's homegrown comedians, what sort of sensibility they bring to the global or North American comedy table when they do get known in that whole sphere? Like, what do you think of as a good thing that Vancouver comedians bring to comedy that you just don't see or hear so much of from other places that breed comedians?
Well, I think the thing about Vancouver is, from a comedy perspective, is people from other cities come here and they say the audiences are really hard. Like they're really
tough
hard
rooms
laughers.
all over this place.
Yeah.
Well, they don't even smile. We've established that.
Yeah, exactly.
How are you going to get them to laugh?
But it's people are pretty uptight here. Like there's a lot of political correctness.
Sure.
The audiences can be really smart, which some comedians dislike. Some comedians like a lot. You never actually know before you go in who's going to be.
How quick does it take before you do know?
It's, sometimes you don't have enough time to recover.
Oh, I see.
This audience is really dumb. Sorry, I don't have that stuff tonight.
Ladies and gentlemen, Nickelback.
Yeah, exactly. So that's something that I think is great about Vancouver comedians is we develop a really thick skin. And then you go to other cities and you do jokes and the audiences go crazy.
Really?
And
even in super comedy towns around the world, you still have that Vancouver skin and it prepares you well?
It's not so much the skin that prepares you. Like the skin, you just develop that from being here. But like your material, the audiences here are so bad that they've demanded your material be so good.
Right.
And so that if you ever do get an opportunity somewhere else,
it's like a grapevine that has grown up through very, very difficult soil.
Yeah.
If you get through it, you're doing pretty well.
Yeah, and you can, show the world your grapes.
It's the great crucible of Vancouver through which your grapes pass. I've been speaking here in Vancouver, British Columbia, specifically Mount Pleasant, a city where everybody is a little bit wet, with comedian Dave Shumka. He is the co-host with Graham Clark of Stop Podcasting Yourself, and as well has his finger on the pulse of the national listening mindset, ear set on CBC. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
This has been a Notebook on Cities and Culture. I've been Colin Marshall. You can keep up with the cultural creators, internationalists, and observers of the urban scene on the show at colinmarshall.org. Thanks. And special thanks to everybody who backed Season 3 on Kickstarter, including Paige Calvert, Jonathan Crow, Douglas Dollars, Paul Doyle, John French, Eric Graham, Will Graham, Umberto Grant, Kimberly Hahn, Carl Haley, Stefan Halperin, Matt Howie, Andrew Hovenick, Mark Hines, Andy Cooney, Mark Larson, Matthew Lickey, Mr. Munvirzi, Rob Montz, Lindsay Muniak, Daniel Murphy, Aidan Nullman, Patrick O'Flaherty, Danny Olson, Michael O'Regan, Blake Riley, Rob Schultz, Cam Smith, Small Demons, Todd Shimoda, Kevin Smokler, Thomas Unterberger, Matt Warren, and Wayne Wright.